I'm going to tell you something that the Iranian government does not want the world to know. Jesus is taking over Iran. Not slowly, not quietly, not in the way that things creep forward over decades and generations, until someone looks back and realizes something has shifted. Rapidly, powerfully, in the middle of a war, in the middle of missiles and strikes and political upheaval and everything that the enemy meant for destruction. Jesus is walking through Iran and he is finding people and he is not asking anyone's permission. In the past 2 months alone, across the network of underground churches and ministries that I am connected to, we have recorded over 10,000 new believers. 10,000. In 2 months, in a country where converting from Islam carries consequences that range from social exile to imprisonment to death. In a country that is currently at war. In a country where the government has spent decades trying to stamp out every flame of the gospel the moment it appears. 10,000 flames. In 2 months. My name is Pastor Elias. I will not give you my full name and I will not tell you which city I am in, and I will not describe my face in enough detail for identification. Because I am an underground pastor in Iran and my continued ability to do what I do depends on my continued ability to not be found. I have been leading an underground church for 11 years. I have been a follower of Jesus for 14 years. And I am recording this testimony today because what is happening in Iran right now is too large and too significant and too gloriously beyond anything any human strategy could have produced for me to stay silent about it. The world needs to know. The church around the world needs to know. And the Iranian people, the ones who have not yet encountered what I am about to describe, need to know that what is coming for them is not condemnation. It is not judgment. It is not the religion they were taught to fear, or the Christianity they were told was a Western weapon. It is a person. And he is already here. Let me tell you about the converts first, because the numbers alone do not capture what is actually happening. 10,000 is a figure, and figures can be received with a nod and filed away. What I want to give you is the reality behind a figure, the faces, the stories, the testimonies of ordinary and extraordinary people who have encountered Jesus in the most unexpected ways and have come to us changed beyond anything their previous lives had prepared them for. The first thing I want you to understand is who these people are. When we talk about revival in Iran, and that is what this is, I am using that word deliberately and with full awareness of its weight. People sometimes imagine young people, educated, perhaps already somewhat westernized, perhaps already somewhat disconnected from traditional Islamic practice. People who were halfway out of the door before Jesus found them. That is not who I am seeing. I am seeing doctors, senior physicians who have spent 20 and 30 years practicing medicine inside the framework of Islamic Iran, who have prayed 5 times daily and fasted every Ramadan and believed with complete sincerity. These are not men and women on the margins of their faith. These are people for whom Islam was the air they breathed and the foundation they stood on. I am seeing military officers, men who have given their careers to the Islamic Republic, men who have carried weapons and followed orders and believed they were serving God by serving the state, men whose identity was so completely woven into the fabric of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard or the regular military that the idea of separating themselves from that identity would have seemed not just dangerous but literally unthinkable. I am seeing Islamic officials, clerics, men of religious education and standing in their communities, men who know the Quran in depth and have built their entire intellectual and spiritual life around its interpretation. These are not people who came to Jesus because they were ignorant of Islam. They came because they encountered something that Islam, for all its depth, did not give them and could not give them. I am seeing government officials, people inside the structures of Iranian political power, who are carrying the new faith in secret at enormous personal risk because what they encountered was too real to deny and too important to abandon regardless of the cost. And I am seeing ordinary people. Mothers and shopkeepers and students and farmers and young men and old women, the full spectrum of Iranian society coming to Jesus in numbers that I would not have believed if I were not inside it watching it happen. What is driving this? What is producing this harvest at this scale and at this speed? Jesus is appearing to people. directly, personally, in dreams, in visions, in moments of crisis, in hospital rooms and military facilities and government offices and ordinary homes and ordinary neighborhoods. He is showing up and introducing himself, and people are coming to us already believing, already converted in the core of themselves by an encounter we had no part in producing, asking us to tell them more, to give them the language for what they have experienced, to help them understand who the person is who found them in the dark. Let me share some of what I have been told. Some of the testimonies that have come to me in the past 2 months. I will not give names. These are people whose safety depends on their anonymity, and I will protect that with everything I have. But the testimonies are real. Every one of them. There is a military doctor, a woman who has worked in military medical facilities for 18 years. She told me that during the early days of this current war, she was working around the clock treating the wounded. On the 5th night, after a particularly devastating sequence of cases, she went to the small room where staff kept their personal belongings, and she sat down on the floor because her legs would not hold her anymore. She was not praying. She was past praying. She said she had nothing left. Not faith, not energy, not the ability to construct a coherent request to God, even if she had believed one would be received. She said into the empty room, with what she described as the last honest thing she had left in her. If there is a healer anywhere, I need to know it is real. Jesus appeared to her in that room. She described him the way everyone describes him, the light that has no source, the face that combines total authority with total gentleness, the sense of being completely known and completely loved in the same moment. He told her that every life she had saved in 18 years of medicine had passed through his hands before it passed through hers. He told her he was the source of the gift she had spent her career using. He told her his name. She came to us 3 days later. She sat in our meeting and she wept for an hour before she could speak. She is one of 10,000. There is a senior cleric, a man with decades of Islamic scholarship behind him, a man who has taught Quranic interpretation and Islamic jurisprudence, and who has spent his entire adult life building a comprehensive understanding of God within the framework of the faith he was born into. He told me that Jesus appeared to him in a dream, not a vague or symbolic dream, a direct encounter, specific and clear, in which Jesus spoke to him about the things he had spent decades studying. Jesus did not argue with him. He did not present counter-arguments to his Islamic theology. He simply showed him something. He showed him who he was, not in words primarily, but in presence. The way you do not need to argue someone into believing the sun is bright if you take them outside and show it to them. This man told me that in the dream Jesus showed him a light that he said contained everything, the beginning of everything, the answer to everything. And Jesus said to him, "This is what you have been studying toward. This is what the signposts were pointing at. I am the destination." He came to us and he was not confused. He was the clearest-minded person I have ever received into our fellowship. A man who had the theological depth to understand exactly what had happened to him and the intellectual honesty to follow the evidence of his own encounter wherever it led. He is one of 10,000. There is a young soldier, barely 20 years old, from a family of deep Islamic faith in a conservative city. He told me he was in a tunnel facility during the early days of this war, when something happened that he and his colleagues cannot explain. He would not give me the details. He was still processing them and I did not press. But he said that what he encountered in that tunnel was a presence so complete and so authoritative that his body simply could not remain conscious in its presence. He woke up in a hospital. He spent the days of his recovery reading the New Testament on a smuggled phone. He came to us having already made his decision. He is one of 10,000. There is a government official. I will say only that he holds a position of meaningful authority in the administrative structure of the Islamic Republic. He came to us through a chain of contacts so carefully constructed that by the time he reached our fellowship, 3 people had vouched for him personally. He told us that Jesus appeared to him while he was in his office late at night reviewing documents related to the war. He said Jesus stood beside his desk and looked at the documents and then looked at him and asked him one question. Jesus asked him, "Is this what you want your life to have been? He said he sat at his desk for a long time after the presence left. Then he picked up his phone and began the process of finding us. He is one of 10,000. And there is a woman, a middle-aged woman from a neighborhood in Tehran that has been significantly affected by the war, whose home sustained damage in the early strikes. She lost her brother in the first week. He was in a building that was hit. She told me that she was sitting in the rubble of a portion of her home on the third day after losing him, and she said something that she said she had never said before in her life. She said she had never doubted Islam until that moment, but in that moment she looked at the sky and said, "If there is a God who is actually good, show me something." Jesus appeared to her in the rubble of her own home. She said he sat beside her, not standing, sitting, at her level, in the dust and the broken concrete. She said he did not immediately speak. He sat with her in her grief for what she described as a long time before he said anything. And when he spoke, he said, "I know his name. I was with him. He did not leave this world alone." She came to us the next day. She has not stopped coming. She is one of 10,000. I want to talk about what this is doing to me as a pastor, because I have been in underground ministry for 11 years. I have shepherded small groups of believers who came to faith slowly, carefully, at great personal cost. I have sat with people in the early terrifying days of their new faith, when they were trying to figure out how to live inside the truth they had found without being destroyed by the consequences of it. I have watched people lose families, lose jobs, lose freedom because they could not deny what they had encountered. This work has always been worth doing, but it has often been difficult and slow and small in the way that faithful underground work is small, measured in handfuls rather than multitudes. What is happening right now is not small. I receive contacts daily, multiple times daily. People who have had encounters and are looking for community and teaching and the language to understand what has happened to them. My network of pastors and house church leaders is overwhelmed, not in a despairing way, in the way of farmers whose fields are producing faster than they can harvest. We do not have enough laborers for what is growing. We are training new leaders as fast as we can. We are distributing material as fast as we can. We are praying without ceasing, because prayer is the one thing we can do that scales without limit. And through all of it, underneath the busyness and the urgency and the constant careful management of security and contacts and the particular operational complexity of underground ministry in a country at war, there is something in me that I want to try to describe. It is joy. A joy that has no natural explanation given the circumstances. A joy that is not the absence of awareness of difficulty. I am acutely aware of the difficulty. The danger is real. The cost to new believers is real. The war around us is real. The suffering of the Iranian people is real. And yet, something is happening that is bigger than all of it, something that the missiles cannot reach, and the government cannot legislate against, and the structures of Islamic institutional power cannot prevent, because it is not happening in any building they can demolish or through any organization they can infiltrate. It is happening in the interior of people, in dreams and visions and supply rooms and tunnels and hospital wards and rubble and government offices. It is happening wherever Jesus chooses to go, and he is choosing to go everywhere. I need to tell you about my own encounter, because this testimony is not only about what I have received from others, it is about what was given to me personally several months ago, that prepared me for what I am now in the middle of. It was before the war, before the strikes of February the 28th. In the quieter but still dangerous period of ministry that preceded all of this, I was in prayer, late at night, alone, in the small room I use for prayer and study. I had been praying for Iran for years, and I had been faithful in that prayer. But I will be honest with you. There were seasons when faithfulness in prayer felt like dropping stones into a very deep well and never hearing them land. Seasons when the evidence of what the prayer was producing was difficult to see. That night was not one of those seasons in terms of my discouragement. I was in a period of reasonable faith and steady ministry. I was not crying out from desperation. I was simply in my ordinary late-night prayer and presence before Jesus. And then he was in the room. I have encountered Jesus in prayer before. in the way that intimate and sustained prayer sometimes produces a sense of nearness, of presence, of communication that goes beyond the words you are speaking. This was different. This was not a sense of nearness. This was presence, unambiguous, specific, undeniable presence. The way the presence of another person in a room is undeniable when they are actually there. He said to me, "I want to tell you what is coming." I said nothing. I simply became as still and as attentive as I have ever been in my life. He said, "Iran is mine. I am going to make that known, not eventually, soon, in the way that harvests happen. Suddenly, when the conditions are right, when the seed that has been in the ground through the long season finally breaks open all at once." He said, "The people who have been praying for Iran, the underground believers, the pastors, the intercessors around the world who have been faithful for decades, their prayers are not lost. Every prayer that was ever prayed for this country is stored and accounted for, and the time is coming when the account will be opened." He said, "You will see things in the coming season that you will not have a category for. People will come to you already believing, I will have found them before you do. Your job is not to produce the harvest. Your job is to receive it and steward it and love the people I bring you the way I have loved you." He said, "Tell your people to get ready. Tell them to prepare room. Tell them to pray without stopping, because the prayers are not decorative. They are load-bearing. The prayers of my people in Iran and around the world for Iran are part of the structure of what I am building here." Then he said something that has stayed with me every day since. He said, "I am going to raise my cross as a banner over this nation, not as a symbol of Western religion, not as a cultural artifact, as the sign of what I did for every Iranian who has ever lived, Muslim, Jewish, Zoroastrian, secular, religious, everyone. I died for Iran, and Iran is going to know it." Then he was gone. I sat in that room until the morning light came through the window. I did not sleep. I prayed and I wept and I praised and I sat in silence and I prayed again. And when the morning came, I gathered the leaders I trust most in our network and I told them what I had been told. I said, "Get ready. Something is coming." That was several months ago. The war began on February the 28th, and the harvest began almost simultaneously, as though the disruption and the crisis and the shaking of every comfortable structure that Iranians had built their sense of security on created exactly the conditions that Jesus had described, the conditions in which people who had never been willing to ask the deepest questions were suddenly asking them, and the one who had been waiting to answer was immediately present to do so. I do not believe Jesus caused the war. I want to be clear about that. The war is the product of human choices and political forces and decades of conflict that have their own terrible logic. Jesus did not send the missiles. Human beings sent the missiles. But Jesus is in the ruins. He was in the ruins before the first strike landed, and he is turning the worst thing into the greatest harvest this nation has ever seen. I want to speak now to the believers who will hear this testimony, the ones who are already following Jesus, in Iran, in secret, at cost, and the ones around the world who have been praying for this nation. To my brothers and sisters inside Iran, you are not alone. I know it feels like it. I know the isolation of underground faith in a country where your faith is illegal and dangerous, and where every person you might want to share it with represents a potential risk. I know the loneliness of carrying something enormous in secret. But you are not alone. There are 10,000 of us right now who came to Jesus in the past 2 months alone. There are the thousands more who came before them. We are a family, and we are growing, and Jesus has not forgotten a single one of us. Hold on. Keep your faith. Keep meeting with whatever small group you have access to. Keep reading. Keep praying. The cross is being raised over this nation, and you will live to see it. To the new believers, the ones who came to Jesus through a dream or a vision or an appearance or a word that came to you in the dark when you were not expecting it, welcome. You are not crazy. What you experienced was real. The person who found you is exactly who he showed you. He was. And there is a community waiting to receive you, imperfect, underground, sometimes frightened, always faithful and completely yours. To the believers around the world who have been praying for Iran, do not stop. Do not stop for a single day. What Jesus told me is true. The prayers are load-bearing. They are part of the structure of what is being built. Every prayer prayed for Iran in the past decade and the decade before that is part of the foundation of what is breaking open right now. You will stand before Jesus one day and he will show you the name of someone in Iran who came to him in the middle of a war, and you will understand that your prayer in your living room at midnight on an ordinary Tuesday was part of the chain that reached them. Do not stop. To the Muslims of Iran who have not yet encountered Jesus but who will hear this testimony, I want to say this with all the gentleness I have. I am not your enemy. The Jesus I follow is not the Jesus of crusades or colonialism or any other thing that has been done in his name that he did not authorize. The Jesus who is appearing to people in Iran right now is the Jesus of the woman in the rubble and the cleric in the dream and the soldier in the tunnel. He is coming to you not to take something from you, but to give you something that cannot be taken away. He is not asking you to become Western. He is not asking you to betray your family or your culture or your people. He is asking you to know him personally, directly, as he actually is. And if you ask him to show you who he is, he will. He's already showing people. 10,000 of them in 2 months. And the number is not finished. I want to close with prayer, because prayer is where this began and prayer is what sustains it, and prayer is what will carry it to completion. Jesus, you told me you were going to take Iran. I have watched you begin to do exactly that. I have received the testimonies of doctors and soldiers and clerics and officials and mothers in rubble and young men in tunnels. And I have seen your hand in every single one of them. I have seen you going into places that no human ministry could reach, and finding people that no human evangelist could find, and introducing yourself in ways that no human strategy could produce. You are the one doing this. We are only the ones receiving it and trying to steward it faithfully. I am asking you, do not stop. Keep going into the dreams. Keep walking into the tunnels and the supply rooms and the hospital wards and the government offices and the rubble. Keep finding the people who are asking the honest question. Keep appearing to the ones who are at the end of what their own frameworks can hold. Keep raising your cross over this nation until there is no corner of it that has not felt the shadow of that cross fall across it. And I am asking the people who hear this testimony, pray. Pray for Iran specifically. Pray for the 10,000 new believers who are carrying their faith in secret in a country at war. Pray for the pastors and house church leaders who are overwhelmed with harvest and need wisdom and protection and endurance. Pray for the dreams and visions to continue. Pray that Jesus keeps appearing to the people of Iran in the night and in the crisis moments and in the quiet moments of honest questioning. Pray that every person who has had an encounter and has not yet found community would be connected to one safely. Pray for Iran's Islamic leaders, not against them, but for them. Jesus appeared to a senior cleric. He can appear to any of them. Pray that he does. Pray that the men who have the most power to harm new believers have the most dramatic encounters with the one those believers follow. That is not an impossible prayer. The history of revival is full of exactly that kind of reversal. Pray for the soldiers who are in tunnels and bases and facilities across Iran right now. Many of them young men who enlisted out of loyalty to something they were told was holy, and who have never been given the opportunity to encounter what is actually holy. Pray for them. Jesus is already going into the tunnels. Pray that he finds every one of them. And pray for the cross to be raised over Iran, not as a symbol of conquest, as a banner of witness, as the declaration that what Jesus did, he did for every Iranian who has ever lived, and that the invitation is open and the door is wide, and he is standing at it, and he is not going anywhere. Iran belongs to Jesus. He told me so himself. And the harvest is proving him right.